Afternoon, everyone. Hello, 2020 Southeast Collaborative Online Conference. My name is Cindy Church, and I'll be your host for this session. Today, presenter Rose Dawson will talk about how Alexandria, Virginia Library embraced the anniversary of the 1939 library sit-in that challenged the rights of its colored residents to use the public library. Rose Timmons Dawson has held the position of director of the Alexandria Library in Alexandria, Virginia for 11 years. Prior to working for the Alexandria Library, Ms. Dawson held a number of progressively responsible positions for the District of Columbia Public Library, from change agent for internal affairs to the coordinator of community youth services. Is supported through the funding of the Library Services and Technology Act through the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Before we get started, I have a few things to share with you. This session will be recorded and archived. A link will be sent out next week with access to the archive session. If there are other people watching this webinar with you, we'd love to hear about it so that we can have an accurate head count for our records. Please send us an email with the names of the people watching with you to your state's contact person. You will have an opportunity to submit text questions to our presenters. Just type them in the chat box. Um, you will receive CEUs for this session and other sessions included in the Southeast, Collaborative Online Conference. Look for the survey link in your inbox on Friday. And now I will turn things over to Rose. Hi, Rose. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Hi, Cindy. Good afternoon, you all. Today, I'd like to share with you how the Alexandria Library, using its 225th anniversary and the 80th anniversary of the 1939 library sit-in, was the model that allowed us to successfully celebrate all of our library history. So, on the national level, one of the things that public libraries tend to know is that we compare ourselves based on our history. And because Andrew Carnegie was considered our patron saint, building more than 2,600 libraries, a lot of us know who was the first public library ever built. And there's often a debate when it comes to that, because Carnegie was associated with Braddock, Pennsylvania, and Allegheny. And while both of them claim to be number one, the truth of the matter is that the Allegheny Library was actually the one that they began construction on first, but it was Braddock who was successful in opening their doors. So the devil is always in the details as far as language. So when you're thinking about history, and you're thinking about history on the local level, um, you know, in your community, then for Alexandria, we're a tourist town. We're similar to Williamsburg, Charleston, and Savannah. And we're very proud of our history because we are the boyhood homes of people like Robert E. Lee and George Washington. And I know many of us think, well, no, Washington was associated more with Mount Vernon, but that was in his older years because he got Mount Vernon from his brother. But he actually hung out and partied in Alexandria because Gadsby's Tavern, if you get a chance to come and visit, is where he held his wedding reception. So as we drilled over a little, thinking about the national level where African American history is concerned, other than slavery and the Civil War, then most of our significant events don't take place until the mid 1950s. We all learned about the Montgomery busboy count. And in the 60s, for those of us in the South, the young men from North Carolina A&T who went and sat in at the Woolworth counter. And then, of course, followed by King's March on Washington. But given these facts, how many of you know when your public library opened? And then you have to ask yourself, how many of you know when your public library integrated? And that is the question that the Alexandria Library found itself having to answer. So, 225 years ago, the Alexandria Library Company was founded, July the 24th, 1794. Now, Alexandrians have always loved libraries. And so the Alexandria Library Company, they opened this library, but it was a subscription library. So basically, you had to pay to play. So if you had $5, then you were able to be a member of the library and you could check out its material. And remember how we talked about our competitive nature? So I am happy to report that the Library of Virginia recognizes Alexandria as the oldest consistently running public library that was made available to its citizens in the state of Virginia. But getting back to the library and its history, the library company from 1794 until the early 30s had housed its collection in numerous buildings throughout the city. So it's a part of the fabric of the city of Alexandria. In your upper right-hand corner, Stabler's Apothecary, that was the first location for the subscription library. And Mr. Stabler was the first librarian. And to this day, the library owns that desk in which he wrote the bills and can be found in our Barrett Library. It made its way throughout the city. It was located in the old firehouse. It was located in Old City Hall. And the Lyceum was actually built to house the Alexandria Library Company at one point in time. We mentioned George Washington being a hood favorite for Alexandria. And so we actually own the medical dictionary that was owned by George Washington. But in the right-hand corner, you'll notice the Alexandria Library, and you'll see that it's a marker that is currently on the front of the public library building. And that is because after 1794 and up to the early 1930s, as you saw that the library company's collection bounced around the city, it was looking for a home. And so one of the things that happened was the Alexandria Public Library of yesterday, by the late 30s, a perfect storm took place. Three things happened. The library company was looking for a home. Dr. Robert Barrett was looking to recognize and honor his mother, Dr. Kate Waller Barrett, who was a woman ahead of her time. And these friends, the Society of Friends, the Quakers, were willing to donate a burial ground. Yes, you heard me correctly, a burial ground to to house the first public library. So with Dr. Barrett's money, they were able to build the facility with the Quakers giving the city a 100-year lease. They were able to build the building on that land, and the library company donated the collection. They went to the city and asked the city to make it a line item in their budget, which the city did. And so for $5,000 each year, the Kate Waller Barrett Public Library was created. However, as we talk about the rules and laws of that time, there were certain residents, certain citizens, while their tax dollars were being used to pay for the public library, they unfortunately were not able to use the facility. And so in 1939, you have an inset of a local attorney, Sam Tucker, on your screen. He was 26 years old. He solicited approximately 10 to 11 young men in the community to stage a nonviolent protest. So, with training, those young men were taught to dress appropriately, to make sure they went into the library and conducted themselves in a proper manner, because what he was banking on was that they would get arrested, because at that time and during that period, colored individuals were not allowed to use public facilities. And that's exactly what happened. Each On the day of the event in August of 1939, 5 of the young men who had trained for the occasion went into the building individually and asked for a library card. They were told no, and each one of them asked and informed that they needed to leave. And each one of them asked, "What will happen if I don't?" They walked over to the shelves, took down a book off the shelf, and sat at individual tables. Well, as you can imagine, this threw the community for a loop. The library was not sure what to do about this. It took them more than 2 hours to figure out that they were going to arrest them. And arrest them they did eventually do, but by this time, more than 200 people were outside of the library waiting, and Sam Tucker had a photographer waiting in the wings. And when his runner informed him that they were indeed bringing the gentleman out, he came around the corner, his photographer snapped the picture, and that is the actual picture that you have on your screen. The young men went to court for actually being accused of disorderly conduct, and Tucker was preparing to go to court on the grounds of challenging equal access to public services. Now, we all have had our libraries were segregated at some point in time, and they eventually integrated. And that is the history that Alexandria recognized that we needed to incorporate into the celebrations that we annually held when we recognized the birthday celebration of our Barrett Library and any of our subsequent libraries that were opened. But somewhere along the line, we lost that history. So because Tucker was unable he was ill by the time the case went to court, and the city, recognizing they were going to lose, they decided to drag out the case. While Tucker was ill, there were several other African American leaders within the community who stepped in, and based on negotiations that they worked out with the city, there was a second library built. So it was a tale of two libraries, the Barrett branch, which was the Kate Waller Barrett Library, the original 1937 facility, was then followed on the heels of that library. They built in 1940, the Robert H. Robinson Library, which was the Negro library for the colored citizenry. And one of the things that they actually used to create this facility was the law of separate but equal. But it was very apparent that the facility was a lot smaller. It had nowhere near the accommodations that the Barrett branch actually had. So as we move forward from our history and we get to the Alexandria of today, I have 6 beautiful locations. I have the Beatley Central Library, the Barrett Branch, my Burke Library, which is my smallest facility, the Duncan Branch, which is my neighborhood library, my local history and special collections, which houses a lot of those original titles that were donated by the library company, and it's within the Barrett Branch. And then I have my law library, which is located within the courthouse. So, in looking at the need to pull out that part of our history, we chose to have an 80th anniversary celebration, recognizing the efforts that took place from those gentlemen. So we created an internal committee and an external committee. So our internal committee had representatives from all of the branches and all the departments within the library system. My external committee for 2019, we got honorary members from within the community. So while they didn't do any of the planning or the programming that was required, we made sure that these individuals helped us get the word out, that they bought into our celebration. Because when you do something like of this nature, there are going to be individuals who don't think it's necessary. Even I ran into older African Americans who told me, sweetie, you need to leave that history alone. You need to leave those people alone. But in going to the faith community, the school system, the Black History Museum, and the chapter of the NAACP, um, then we were successful in having folks who were willing to support where we wanted to go with this. So one of the things that primarily took place is the internal committee, which were staff, primarily came up with a list of those types of things that they wanted to see happen throughout the year. Because one of the first things that was made clear was that you don't want to try and cram the entire celebration on one day or even one week. And so we made sure that there were activities and events that took place at every single library. Now, if they didn't have a program, they had a display of some sort. But we made sure that we had those activities take place throughout the year. So we celebrated for the entire year. We created a logo and the tagline, and it's what you see on the sticker off to the side. Alexandria Library sit-in of 1939, a peaceful protest ahead of its time. We then sent out press releases making sure everyone knew that there were going to be events and activities taking place throughout the year. And then the actual flyers and any of the publicity that we did, we took this little symbol and we placed it on those flyers or by those programs. So it was basically a way of telling people, if you like this program, then look for this symbol because there are possibly other events that would interest you as well. We were successful in getting proclamations. We ensured that there was a signature sit-in event. We purchased the domain names for library sit-in. So if you were to go and search librarysitin.org, then we actually own that. And that was to ensure that our sit-in is the first one that comes up during anyone's search. And then, of course, we applied for, in previous years, for a historic marker and a wayfinding sign. So implementing some of what I just talked about. Library cards, that's still who we are. And so we designed special library cards. And once again, because it was the 225th anniversary, and so that was the thing that the general population was expecting, a way for us to celebrate the 225th, we made sure that we also had things that matched or paralleled with that where the 80th was concerned. So we had library cards, and the 80th anniversary library card, we actually ran out of that card and have had people request additional cards. And so we are looking at reordering those so that people can swap that one out. We created a direct mailer postcard. One of the things we did with that, it has most of your pictures that tie in with the sit-in. And basically what we did was we donated those postcards to the Visitors Center in Alexandria so that any of the people who came in to get information about Alexandria, they were welcome to take that postcard, hoping that with a free postcard, they would choose to write on it and mail it back home, or it would make them curious enough to come over and visit the public library. We also did implementation of our signature programs. Alexandria, like most public libraries, we have an all book, one community, one book read, and we call it All Alexandria Reads. And with that particular year, we actually had It's All Relative because it ties into the whole thing of genealogy and families. And then on the other side on the screen, you'll see that we have our annual Le Tour de Alexandria bike tour. And what happened with that was, as they ride around the city, they stop at library facilities usually. But this particular year, we chose locations that tied into the sit-in. And so they rode and stopped at the Robinson Library, which is now the Alexandria Black History Museum. we had them ride and stop at where Tucker's offices were, and other places like that. And someone was in place on the tour who was able to speak to the places that they were visiting and how they tied into the history of the library. Now, we had one major event, culminating event, to highlight the sit-in, and that was we did a We Are the Alexandria Library sit-in, and that was a descendants panel. And what we did is we contacted family members and we asked them if they wouldn't participate and come and share with us some of the background that they knew pertaining to their family member who participated in the sit-in, and give us some insight about those individuals. We had 3 members of who actually came and sat and spoke. I functioned as moderator. The committee created the questions that I asked of the individuals, and then of course we allowed the public to ask questions. This is my meeting room in the Beatley Library. This photo was taken there. We had a standing room only crowd for this event. The room holds 200 people. We actually had an overflow section, and my IT staff set it up so that we were able to stream the event. And so we got an awful lot of publicity from this activity. One of the other major highlights where this is concerned, the picture here, while there were only 3 of them who actually spoke for us, you have 3 other individuals who joined in on the picture because they were representing 2 other family members. We had a Tucker representative and a Clarence Strange family representative, and it was the Morris Murray and Buddy Evans family members who were part of the panel. But the 2 gentlemen to the right of the screen, my right of the screen, is the mayor and the Commonwealth's attorney. And what happened was the Commonwealth's attorney petitioned the court to dismiss the charges. Our research showed that while they were arrested on bogus charges, when it became clear that they were going to win the lawsuit, the courts kept dragging it out. And we could never find anything. All of the papers pertaining to the trial have been destroyed, interestingly enough. And so we were never sure about what happened where the gentlemen were concerned. And it was the relative, the nephew of Morris Murray, who shared with us that his uncle said the only thing that he had as a regret in his life was that those bogus charges had never been dropped. So based on his input, the Commonwealth's attorney petitioned the court to dismiss all charges, and that is what took place. And so this is a modern depiction of what restorative justice looks like in this time of racial equity. On the other side of the screen, you'll see that we created read posters. So you'll recall the iconic photograph of the gentleman walking down the stairs. We had 5 family members show up, and they basically, while the front of the building is different, we positioned them in what we thought to be a similar way of that original photograph. And we took it, and then we created read posters that were very, very popular, and we were able to take those and place them throughout the city. We had all our other city departments requested copies of these read posters, and so they were put up in October was when we did the event, and they were posted and stayed up at least until January or February. And it's not a good celebration unless you're able to give away a few items. And so the logo turned into a lapel pin, and in trying to mirror that where the 225th was concerned, we created stickers and magnets that people were able to use pertaining to the library's traditional story. Out of Obscurity is a DVD that was published back in the 80s, and it was created by a young aspiring producer at that time. And what the young man did is he went and he spoke with Samuel Tucker, his brother Otto, who is one of the gentlemen who participated in the sit-in. William Buddy Evans was another gentleman who participated. He was able to capture the words from Catherine Scoggins, who was the librarian. She's also interviewed within this DVD, and it is narrated by the late NAACP chairman, Julian Bond. And so we gave away bags to any of the kids who came and went through the displays that we had to help tell the story of the sit-in as well. So after you do your events, and it's not really after you do your events, but even with your early planning, you need to make sure that you include an evaluation component. And so while we knew we were going to do events throughout the year and every month, there was a short evaluation. It had about 5 questions on it that was handed out, and people were asked to fill them out after each program and turn them in. So that was our traditional evaluation that we used to measure success. The other thing we did was measured how successful we were in getting into the media. So where the news media was concerned, the local paper, the Alexandria Gazette, had a 2-page story on the actual, we did a film screening of the Out of Obscurity, and there was a 2-page coverage on that particular program. We also did the signature event, and that received additional coverage when it was hosted in October. But as far as digital media, as I stated before, we had the librarysitin.org, our website, and so we tracked the amount of visits to that page. We have 45 6-inch digital displays within each of our facilities, and it highlights the programs that are coming, encouraging people to, when they're in the facility, if they aren't ones to take up flyers, as they walk in, they will see this screen and it will tell them the coming events and programs that are going to happen. And also, we were successful in getting the 8th anniversary listed in Chase's calendar of events, so that from now on, August the 21st, you'll see that it says that the Alexandria Library celebrates this occasion and this event. Now, social media is the other way of evaluating your programs and services. And so this was a new piece for us this time. And what we did is that where our Facebook page, naturally, we were highlighting and we were tweeting about any of the events and programs. But one of the things we did this time was as we rolled out a new service, and in this particular instance, the library had decided that it was going to begin circulating the historic American Girl dolls. And so in honor of the 225th anniversary, we chose Felicity. And in honor of the 80th anniversary of the sit-in, we chose Melody. Now, Melody, what we did is we partnered with the Virginia rail system. And so I had the pleasure of escorting Melody at Union Station in Washington, D.C. And so we took pictures there. And then she got on the train, and my partner with VRE, we rode down. So we had like 2 or 3 stops, and she took pictures with some of the other individuals on the train. And my communications officer was present, and he tweeted out the events that were going on while she was riding. One of the real pleasures in doing this occurred when we arrived in Alexandria, and I stepped off onto the platform with the doll, and I found myself greeted with approximately 16 to 20 little girls whose parents had read the press release that morning saying that Melody would be coming to visit Alexandria, and they were there on the platform with their own personal American Girl dolls. We then took Melody throughout the week and we had her tour Alexandria because that was part of why she was here. And so taking some of the more historic, additional historic sites that are a part of the city, she was a part of the tourism, and people really followed the tweets and the messages that we put out when it came to Melody traveling throughout the city. So standing the test of time, when doing a program like this, after it's all said and done, you really want to have some other things that leave a lasting impression. And so for us, we worked with the city's Office of Historic Alexandria to create a wayfinding sign. And this sign is now located in front of the Barrett Library. We were successful in getting proclamations not only from the Virginia General Assembly, but we also received proclamations from the Alexandria City Council. And last but not least, because it was a historic occasion and a historic site, we were successful in procuring a historic marker from Richmond, Virginia. So in summary, the reason why we feel this was a successful program and why it's worth doing and how to go about doing is you want to focus on developing a robust communication plan. And then if you implement the programs year round, then you're able to capture the interest because it's not just a one and done. You want to make sure that this becomes a part of your library's story, and nothing better than to have others, particularly your residents and citizens, walk around and share that story on your behalf. And then we ensured that we could receive national recognition of the Alexandria sit-in so that it wasn't just found within our local media, but it received coverage in the Washington Post and a number of magazines as well. So I strongly encourage you when celebrating your library's history that you be inclusive and you celebrate all of your library history. And at this time, I'd love to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you very, very much, Rose. I had put something in the chat about questions. I guess one thing that comes to mind, you know, when I'm thinking about programming, for me at least, is now that you've been through this process, if you had to do it again or something similar, any lessons learned or any do's or don'ts?
So lessons learned. So the 80th anniversary wasn't our first time celebrating this. We did try and celebrate it for the 75th anniversary. And the big lesson we learned at that point in time was we weren't successful in establishing contact with the families. And so when we did that event, there was that gaping hole. And when some of them attended our big signature event, it was very awkward, frankly, that here are these people. And while I'm inviting them to come up and to be recognized, the fact that they were not a part of the program was very obvious. And so when we did the 80th anniversary, we knew from that lesson that we weren't going to roll out any large scale event without including the family. And so it did. It took us a while to establish contact. And then once again, you had people who did not want to discuss it. It was something their family member did not talk about. And so there was that hesitation. And so you had to sell it to them that we won't do anything that you all aren't comfortable with doing, but maybe we can do some gentle programming. And so the first thing we convinced them of was the read posters. And so that it was just something for them to see. And that's why, and the screening of the movie. And when they saw the number of people show up to see a film that's over 10, 15 years old, then they realized that there really was a sincere effort here and that people did want to hear their story. So that was one of the major lessons learned. If you can involve the families or if you can involve the community, then take advantage of any of those individuals.
That's great. It's a great answer. I see a comment from Vivian. I'm so glad you're sharing the do's and don'ts of this event. We are celebrating our 20th anniversary of our branch. So, um,
Good
anything
luck.
anything you wouldn't do? I mean, you talked about including you making sure the families are included. I mean,
One of the
much promote.
no,
Go ahead.
one of the
Sorry.
things that I will say is that you do have to take care of the language that you use and the verbiage that is used because um, older individuals and in this day and time, people tend to take offense when certain things are said a certain way, and so we were very cognizant of the fact that there were times when there were certain things that we wanted to have said that yes, we did actually, I would be the face and the voice on that particular issue because number one, it showed that it had the support at the highest levels of the organization. It definitely did not hurt that I am an African American female. And also, I happen to be the first African American to hold the position of library director. And so, in telling them that I stand on the shoulders of the what those gentlemen did, I am very much aware of who I owe my job to. So you want to keep some of those sorts of things in mind.
And in planning, did you I mean, it sounds like when you were reaching out to the families, you really needed to start this process. Like this was 2019, surely
Oh,
in
yes.
2018. Yeah. So you were way
Yes.
ahead. Yeah. So
Yes, because, and they tended to be bashful. Like I said, we were still missing representation from one of the families. Um, and it was because one of the things was that, we're librarians. And so my staff, they did basically search those families as if they were doing genealogy. And for those that we couldn't find, then we realized that the faith community was where we could possibly go to get make contact, and that's exactly what happened. A number of them worshipped in several of the old historic churches, and so in getting and having the faith community functioning as one of the members on our external committee, then they were the ones who were comfortable and going and trying to convince people to participate or making the ask on our behalf because people didn't know us and there was still this lack of trust. So that's the sort of thing you want to be able to take advantage of the community ties that you have and support.
that makes perfectly good sense. So be aware of all communities and, you know, be aware that this may take time. So anyway, and I don't see any other questions. I want to thank you, Rose, for being here today, and thank you everyone for attending our webinar. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to contact your state library's continuing education coordinator. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate if you would complete that in your feedback. This assures that we can provide data to the Institute of Museum and Library Services and continue to do great events like this. And I wanted to thank you all for being here. And this concludes the 2020 Southeast Collaborative Online Conference. See you again next year.
Thank you.